The city of Mountain View has indicated that they would be willing to give us $23 million to help finance the permanent park facilities in that area. So besides completing the deal to actually buy the property, get the funding, and to close on the agreement, we need to build a school there. We need to decide how many students are going to go there, when are they going to go there, what kind of buildings are going to go there, what are the attendance boundaries in the Los Altos School District that are going to go to that school. And so we expect to work closely with the City of Mountain View on a master plan that will go over details like the construction, the design of the school, traffic, safety, all those kinds of things. The reason why we're doing this is because it's essentially a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to buy 12 acres of land in an area that is under intense development. I don't see 12 acres showing up anytime in the next 10, 20, 30 years. It's also in an area that doesn't have a school. It's the only area in the Altos School District that doesn't have a local school. And on top of that, this particular deal is structured in such a way that the land cost is essentially borne by developers, who, by the way, get a benefit for buying those development rights. They get to transfer those development rights to other parts of Mountain View, and the developments there could be a little bit larger. So I personally think that this is a win for everybody. It's a win for you because you get a school and a park in the area. It's a win for us because the deal is structured in such a way that we get a whole bunch of extra money that allows us to do better schools, better facilities, upgrades, and stuff like that. And the developers get the opportunity to increase the size of their developments in other parts of other parts of the city of Mountain View. So, any particular questions about that? Or do we want to wait for, where's Bryan? Do we want to wait for questions at the end, or I'm happy to take them now.
Two quick ones. At the beginning you said there were 4 possible sites, and then the second question is how many students would be able to house in this particular location?
So the question was, I said there were 4 possible sites. I think there were 4. 5150 El Camino was one. There was a very abortive consideration of a site in Cucina called Brainerd. Any other major sites that we seriously considered? No. We looked at a lot of different sites. 10 acres of land, if we follow our current small neighborhood school model, the maximum is 600-ish. But we also recognize that we may have to make a more dense school, a 2-story school. All our current schools, except for the junior highs, are 1-story. And so we're open to that possibility. As I said, we are going to work closely with the City of Mountain View to flesh all that stuff out. Okay.
All right, there'll be time for questions at the end, too, if people come up with others. But I wanted to give Mayor Siegel a chance to speak for a couple minutes.
Good to see you all out here on a Saturday afternoon. That's incredible. After the City of Mountain View adopted the precise plan for this whole area, the San Antonio area, some of us said, hey, we forgot to put a school here. And so we started talking to the school district and others to consider various sites and how those sites might be financed. And our staff came up with this very complicated thing called transfer of development rights. But the main thing is that the City Council pretty much unanimously believed that if city resources, whether it be development rights, funds, whatever, are used for the site, we're doing that because this area needs a school that serves the neighborhood. So our city council is pretty much unanimous that we want a neighborhood school here, or at least part of the school be a neighborhood, the campus be a neighborhood school. We've been split, however, as to what our role is in making that decision. About half of us think that we should only provide the funds and the development rights if it's a neighborhood school, and the other half says that this is such a complicated transaction involving federal realty, involving perhaps negotiations with Polish charter school, that we didn't want to dictate exactly what the school district does. So again, we agree on what we would like to see. We disagree on the strategy for getting it. And we're going to find out if this comes back to us exactly how each of us feels. We have one council member whose participation in this discussion has been challenged because he's part of it. I guess he's an owner or part owner of a child care center that rents space from the Los Altos School District, and we don't know whether he'll be participating in future discussions. But basically, the city's interest is, first, we're putting funds here because it's Mountain View resources we want to use for Mountain View, and we're trying to solve traffic, parking, housing issues all at the same time. So that's another reason why we want a neighborhood school. I personally we have two schools two campuses in the Mountain View Wisman district, where we have a split campus, Castro Mistral and Stevenson Durkoff, adjacent schools, one of which is a neighborhood school, the other which is a magnet school, and that conceivably might work here. We'd like some imagination used for trying to solve this problem. We also, in the Mountain View Wisman district, we have some schools that are from a higher socioeconomic level and some with a lower socioeconomic level. And our school district and our PTAs, everybody tries to work together to make sure that the resources go where they're needed, that we try to even out the opportunities. So we find from some of our low-income immigrant communities, people who, in the discussions over people possibly losing their apartments, they're saying, please, I want to stay in Mountain View because this is my best opportunity, or my kid's best opportunity to go to college. So even though we have some schools in lower socioeconomic areas, we feel that the other school district is really making an effort to give everybody a chance. So, there's 7 members of our council, and we don't always agree on these things. We have a split vote on the strategy, but I think we're pretty much agreed that we would prefer a school that serves this neighborhood. But we have to look ahead because this neighborhood is changing with all the new apartments being built. Those will not initially be providing a lot of students, based on what you've seen at Carmel the Village. But over time, with all the construction that goes on here, we will see changing demographics, more students. And this, as far as we're concerned, this area needs a school, and it needs the athletic facilities that go along with that school.
Thank you, Mayor Siegel. Unfortunately, as I was dealing with technical information, I was not listening closely to Vladamir, so I just want to make sure that he mentioned that between the new school campus and the city park, there will be, we think, a total of about 6 acres of open field and park space over at the Kohls site, which is just a tremendous, would be, I think, a tremendous community asset to have that rather than another 6 acres of tall buildings over there. Margaret, would you like to say anything?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming out. This is really a great turnout. I'm really impressed, and I appreciate you taking your Saturday afternoon to be here. And I want to thank Alice Lee for helping to organize this with Bryan. As mentioned, I'm on the city council with our mayor, and I think I may be the longest serving elected involved in this conversation. By way of just history, I'm serving my 3rd term on the city council, and this discussion started probably around 2011, 2012. As Lenny mentioned, we were doing our general plan update and our precise plan update for the San Antonio area. And as we were looking at where in the city we could look at more growth and development, it was actually the community that came together and helped us make those decisions. And they thought the San Antonio area, especially with the shopping center, if you remember, it was the Sears and kind of a sad shopping center. And so we really wanted to revitalize that. And the developers came in and they said, well, we really need a mixed-use project with some office, some housing, some retail, and that's why what we have up is what's going up. But as part of that, it was actually some of the Los Altos school board members at that time, I don't think Bryan or Vladamir were there, but they started to come to our council meetings and asked us to help them find land for a new school, seeing that there was more population growth here. And that was how it was approached. We were approached as saying that because, growth is happening in this part of the school district, which happens to be in Mountain View, we as the city should help them build a new school. So that was how this conversation began. Since then, fast forward, we're at a point where there is a site identified. I've served on there was a task force for this 10th site to help make a recommendation on what should go there in terms of whether it should be a neighborhood school or the Bullis Charter School. I know Vladamir didn't maybe appreciate it, but I did bring up a third option of putting Egan Middle School there. Because frankly it sounded like the biggest issue is boundary changes, and I understand how hard that is. I have 2 daughters myself in Mountain View schools, and so my thought was Egan, you could just move them over, and it was a compromise, my attempt at a compromise, so I just threw that out. But as Lenny said, for the city council, our decision is basically we have to sign the final agreement on this TDR, the Transfer of Development Rights scheme, and then the parkland fees, the $23 million. So for the city, whenever we have development happen, we require the developer to either build a park if there's enough space, or to give us park fees. And so we've collected a lot of fees over the years, and we have enough to be able to pay to contribute $23 million, and that would be for the use of the fields, and hopefully we'll have other amenities like a gym and whatnot, and using that after school hours. But in addition to that, as mentioned, there's almost 12 acres that they're looking at purchasing, and 2 of those acres will actually be just a straight park. The developer Graystar that's building the Safeway site, they were able to reach, I guess as part of this, an agreement to purchase 2 acres for a park to satisfy their park responsibility for that development. So we'll have 2 acres of the full-time park regardless of what happens at the school. So our decision is we just need to make that final decision. As Lenny said, we are split on whether we think we should require it to be a neighborhood school or allow the school district to decide what that use should be. Personally, I am on the side that I think, because we are contributing substantial amount, we're really helping to make this happen, if you ask me. We should be able to just to decide what the use of that land is. So in terms of enrollment and boundaries, and that is definitely not our purview as city council, but I think that as, the use of the land with facilities is something that we could potentially decide upon. So I just wanted to hear from all of you, having served on the task force, and what I saw missing was the voices of the families that were going to be directly affected. And we had some representation from the crossings and other parts, but this area del Medio was not a part of that. So I really appreciate you all coming out, and would love to hear from you. Thank you. Oh, yes.
Is there any way you can give us some type of visual of, is it just Kohls? That'll be the school? And then also, how are you going to split the shopping area and the school zone?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, I don't have a nice visual, but if I can give you, I'll try to paint the picture. The site that we're looking at is bounded by California Avenue, Showers Avenue, the Hetch Hetchy right-of-way, which is basically the part that's been developed already. There's that dog park in the middle, the big open space with roads on each side. The reason why that doesn't have any buildings on it is because the Hetch Hetchy water pipes run underneath there, and so nothing can be built on that. And those water pipes actually continue past the new development, and basically just on the south side of the Kohls and the 24-hour fitness, the one closer to California, and sort of past all that other development. It crosses the street, goes past the wheelworks. And so that's the other boundary, and then the extension of Pachetti, which is basically the boundary between the new development and the old shopping center. So that's kind of the big rectangle that we're talking about. And then we've done some very preliminary studies. We think that the city park is most likely going to be at that California Pachetti corner in some configuration. And then we've done some, high-level sketches just to make sure there's no reason that we can't fit everything that we want to fit onto that site. But nothing that's ready for sort of public as far as more specific site design at this point. Did that answer both of your questions? I just also wanted to mention and make sure that I've got it right, that the $23 million in park fees that the city is generously offering to contribute is generated, I think, is basically generated entirely from development within this area. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's...
Mostly the Prometheus project on San Antonio, you can see.
Yeah, Lenny was saying mostly the Prometheus project on San Antonio. That's actually generating enough money in park fees to cover the $23 million city contribution. So we're not taking fees sort of from the broader city and using them here. This is actually exactly what those fees are kind of intended to cover, at least in my opinion, not being a council member. So next we have Jeff Baer, who's the superintendent of the district, who's going to say a few words, only if you want to, Jeff.
I think questions would be better. Hi, I'm Jeff Baer. I'm the superintendent of schools in Los Altos School District. That covers all 7 elementary schools and the 2 junior high schools. I appreciate having the time to come out here and hear from you and get some input about this project. It is it's an exciting opportunity. As Vladamir said earlier, we really think it's once in a lifetime. The development is going up quickly in Mountain View, and the opportunity to capture land for a school, whatever that school is the timing is perfect for that. We certainly appreciate the partnership with the City of Mountain View in working to make this happen. It is an incredibly as you kind of got into when Vladamir was talking, it is an incredibly complicated process, but 2 public agencies, the city and the school district, coming together to maximize the benefit for the public is just a fantastic thing, and we look forward to bringing it to the finish line and making that happen. All right, with that.
All right, so I think at this point, I want to open it back up for questions. If any of you have questions that you'd like to ask. In the back.
Sorry, Rocky, you're late.
That's all right.
It's not really a question, it's more of a comment. I know there's been a lot of discussion about which school should go on that site, whether it's Egan or neighborhood or village charter. And for me personally, I don't care. I don't care which school. For me, what's important is the process, the dialogue, the communication between all the interested parties. You may have noticed nationally the political discussion is kind of polarized. So for me, it's a process that's really. Sorry about that. Can you hear me? So for me, really, it's just the process of discussion and inclusion and hearing from all interested parties to make sure. Because with that, I think we all get to a good outcome that's going to work for the long term. And I know that you at the school board have done a lot of work with Kohls Charter to come to a good relationship, and I'd love to see that continue over the next few years.
I'm going to stand over here.
Yeah. I'd like to hear more comments, not just...
Yeah. To be clear, if you guys have comments or thoughts, those are just as welcome as any questions. And there's a mic right there.
I have a question. Los Altos School District is one of few districts where we have junior highs and not middle schools. And if we ever decide to move to 3-year middle school, we'll have this discussion over again because we'll need 50% more kids in Blach and Egan, and some of the existing elementary school will be underpopulated. So why not solve these problems, at once?
Yeah, I think that that's definitely a discussion. Just feeding back still. Is that better?
With 2 mics on.
Oh, sorry. I'll just. Is this on? All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, two mics is not working, so
No,
I'll just try to repeat the questions. The question was about the fact that Los Altos School District is one of few in California that has junior highs that are just 7th and 8th grade rather than middle schools, which are 6th, 7th, and 8th, or even 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th in some cases. And that's something that we've talked about actually for a lot of years, and one of the biggest barriers has just been that in order to add 6th grade to Blach and Egan, we would obviously need 15 new classrooms and space, and since the charter school has also been sharing the Blach and Egan campuses, there's been neither space nor money to make those changes. And so the question was, wouldn't it be great to solve all of these issues simultaneously? And the answer is yes, it's always great to solve issues simultaneously. And it is one of the reasons that we are in discussions with the charter school about a long-term facility solution with them, because we know from our side we really would like to have the option to add 6th grade to those campuses, and as long as the charter school is there, we can't. So that just feeds into the entire discussion of how can we come to an agreement with the charter school on a long-term solution that will really be the best for all the kids.
Pass it back. Pass it.
I was going to mention that. So my son has been in, he was in elementary school same school from kindergarten all through 6th, and he's now at Egan in 7th grade, and having him, my son in 7th grade at Egan now, and he was at Covington the whole kindergarten through 6th, and having 6th grade still part of elementary school was a great benefit to him. I know people are wanting to move their kids along quickly, but I can tell you that having that 6th grade year with the peers that he grew up with, the smaller atmosphere, and the way that Covington has divided up by having the teachers that already start rotating through 3 specialized teachers with English, social studies, and math is really a benefit to have that. So it's kind of an incremental change for him. And so he's much more confident and secure, and making that transition to 7th grade has been great for him. So that was a plug that it worked for my son in particular. But I had another question too. What is the process for deciding who's going to be on that new campus?
So the process for making that decision has been a series of board meetings. So we've had, I think, 2 meetings already. We got feedback both from the 10th Site Task Force that Councilmember Abe-Koga was a member of, and then we also got feedback from an online feedback forum called Thought Exchange, which was a comment gathering exercise that we did back in June. So we got those reports, I think, 2 board meetings ago, and then we had some more discussion. We asked staff for some more historical information and data and different things, and we got that report at our most recent board meeting, which was September 24th. And then our next board meeting, which is October 8th, at 7, which is a Monday night, 7 o'clock, down at the district office. We're going to continue the discussion. It's possible that we'll make a decision as early as that, at least in that very high theoretical level. So it may happen as soon as that, it may not. We don't always make decisions as quickly as we would like to, but that's sort of a rough outline of where we are in the process so far. Yes, yeah. The question is whether is a shared site part of that discussion. We are discussing all of the options right now. If you want to look at some of the data that we are looking at, there is a 50-slide presentation that was on our agenda on our meeting at the 24th, September 24th. So if you go to the LASD website and follow the links to the board and to the board agendas, you can check that out. And there's also a recording of the discussion that we had. So I encourage, if for those of you who are interested and have the time and energy, I encourage you to go look at that, and please feel free to email us your thoughts. It's never too late. Any other comments? Oh, yeah.
Sorry if you already covered this, but if it's a neighborhood school, would it be
If it's an LASD. Oh, sorry. The question was, if it's a neighborhood school, does that mean it would be a K through 6 site? And that's sort of one of the questions. As Councilmember Abe-Koga mentioned, some people are advocating that it be the junior high school, which I think would still. And another question is, what does neighborhood school exactly mean? If it was the junior high school, does that mean it's a neighborhood school since the neighborhood can go there when they're in 7th and 8th grade? If it were a typical LASD elementary school, then it would be K through 6, the same as our other elementary schools. And then there are, a variety of other. We've looked at a lot of different permutations. Did that answer the question or not? I mean, another question is, if it is a neighborhood school, where exactly are the attendance boundaries? Because that's not obvious either, right? It could be everything on this side of El Camino. It could be everything on the other side of San Antonio. It could be some combination, extending across El Camino. It could be some combination of those. So these are all, as I said, we looked at a lot of permutations. 50-slide deck at our last meeting. So because there's just a lot of possible variations. So the question was, if you live in this neighborhood and you're currently zoned into Santa Rita, will you have the option of going to Santa Rita if we create another school over here and change the attendance boundaries so that if you live over here, you'd be zoned over there? And a couple of things, just to be clear, if we do create a new school over there, the earliest that any students could walk through the front door is probably 2022. So that's a few years away. Second is that the attendance boundary discussion will actually kind of be a follow-on discussion. I think maybe not even immediately follow-on if we decide to make that a neighborhood school. Since it won't open for a little while, it doesn't make sense for us to adjust attendance boundaries now when we don't really know how many kids will be living in each of our various school areas 3 or 4 years from now. So that's specific attendance boundaries is a decision that we would make much closer to the actual opening of that campus. And then whenever attendance boundaries are changed, usually there is at least a little bit of an option for students that are nearing 5th or 6th grade to stay in their current school rather than have to transition twice in a short amount of time. Sorry, I think.
Has a traffic study been done?
A formal traffic study has not been done. At some point, we will go through, once we've gotten a lot more specific about what we want to do, there's a process called CEQA, C-E-Q-A, which is California Environmental Quality Act, which is basically a very detailed process mandated by the state, which involves traffic and noise and safety and pollution, and all sorts of those kinds of details about how a particular project will affect the surrounding neighborhood will affect both those who are there every day and those in the surrounding neighborhood. So that's something that absolutely will be done. That's generally a 6 to 12 month process. The question was whether opening a neighborhood school here would result in the closure of an existing LASD school. I think the board has been pretty clear that closing an existing LASD school is not something we want to contemplate. So we would not, if opening a neighborhood school here would directly result in the closure of an existing school, it would be, to make a vast understatement, it would be extremely difficult for us to make that decision. At a high level, well, and then the question of who goes there, who goes there could shift over the next 10 or 20 years too, right? Because schools fill up, they flow down. There's, even in my time of, paying close attention to the board and being on the board, we have schools that have had as many as 600 students and, as few as 415 students, just because of the way populations ebb and flow. And so, whatever decision we make today might not make the same amount of sense in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. Yeah, and so,
just like to make a comment. Definitely for me, I also think that the rest of the board feels this way.
Louder.
Okay, sorry. A comment. Our primary goal is the educational outcomes of your kids. And everything we do, everything we think about, all the options we look at, we try to evaluate how is this going to affect the educational outcomes of your kids. And we have currently in the district 4,400 kids in LASD plus 900 in village charter. That's a lot of kids. And we're trying to balance a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different options. And as Bryan said, if there had been an obvious solution, we would have done it a long time ago, because we don't want to spend time on facilities. Don't want to spend time on facilities. I want to spend time on curriculum, instruction, and teachers, and how to get better educational outcomes for all your kids. So the comment was that your parent felt that moving Egan across on this side of the campus, on this side of El Camino, would create a more holistic feeling in the entire district. That's entirely possible. One of the reasons, by the way, you may be curious why the Los Altos School District has a huge chunk of Mountain View inside its borders. Also, we have part of Palo Alto, in some parts, we also have part of Cupertino, and I believe we have one house in Sunnyvale, office building in Sunnyvale. The school district was founded in 1909. Los Altos town was founded in 1952. So the boundaries of the school district were set well before the boundaries for the town were. We realized that El Camino is a boundary, and it turns out that San Antonio now has become a boundary. Both of them are 6-lane streets, and it's just as bad to cross San Antonio as it is to cross El Camino. Again, these are all things that we're trying to weigh and evaluate. Speaking for myself, and I'm sure Bryan and the rest of the board members feel the same way, send us your comments. Trustees@lasdschools.org. It's really easy. Shoot us an email. Tell us what you think. Tell us why you think that way, and tell us what you think the consequences of your proposal are. I want to hear them, and I don't think that I'm the best person to make all the decisions on this. Yeah.
I just wanted to make a comment that I know that Margaret charters will want it permanent, and what I'm hearing wants a permanent location. And again, I'm new, so I'm hearing, but so I was trying to figure out why, if they're getting a new school and they're in Buffalo, why we're thinking about picking up a school that's already, got the kids and the facilities and everybody's permanent. That we're thinking of moving them rather than just moving the charter school. Is it not our? I mean, does the charter school have to agree to move? Is that how it works?
So the question was, why is it we're thinking of all these other options, given that the charter school currently is in portables and would be moving into a new school? Great question. And the answer is there are lots of different factors that we have to take into consideration. We've heard some of them today. For instance, traffic. How is that going to affect traffic? How is it going to affect the sort of the holistic feel of the area? The city of Mountain View really wants a neighborhood school, as do some of the board members. So all those things play into it. So the question was, doesn't the charter school take children from different districts? The answer is yes, they do. Our obligation under Proposition 39 is to provide reasonably equivalent facilities for every in-district charter school student. And that's what we have been doing since then. So it's they can have out-of-district students, but we're not responsible for housing them.
I just wanted to, because I think Jennifer also asked whether the charter school has to agree as to which facilities they get. And the answer is sort of. So the way that charter school law works, as Vladamir said, is we're obligated to provide them with reasonably equivalent facilities for all of their in-district students, proportional to the facilities that our other schools have. But that's kind of a year-by-year process, which takes a lot of time, is sort of annoying. Obviously, they don't really want to be learning on a year-by-year basis where they're going to be. And so we're coming up to the end of a 5-year agreement that between the charter school and the district as to where they would be and how we, what facilities we would provide. They could plan for the future. We could plan for the future. That was great. Those 5 years are just about up. They'll be up at the end of this school year. So what we would like to do is come to a new long-term agreement with them about where they will be. And obviously, coming to an agreement with them will require their agreement. And so that's kind of the tension there.
So are they, at this point, do we have to give them permission to stay on?
Well, so if we're the charter school really excited about coming over and occupying this campus, then I think that would simplify a lot of these conversations. Their representative to the 10th Site Task Force did not express excitement about their school relocating to this campus on a long-term basis.
And they would prefer to stay like a bunker.
It's not clear. We've been having actually discussions, myself and another board member, with some of their board representatives for the last year, trying to figure out if we can come to an agreement. We've not come to an agreement yet, but we're continuing those discussions.
I'm just guessing if you chose a school that's already in session, all these other elementaries, and you told them to leave, I'm pretty sure you're going to have the same response from all of those people that they don't want to move, but they're permanently there, versus people who have no location right now, right?
Right. The comment was that obviously nobody wants their school campus and their school to be significantly disrupted, and that is very true. Margaret, do you have a comment?
I would just add that one of the issues that came up from the task force was that Bullis is 900 students, and we've heard, it's not confirmed, but they all want to be on one site. The site is 10.5 acres, so it's smaller, and we can build up and build the classroom facility, but the population is bigger than the other schools, so that's the challenge, is that it's a bigger population.
But I guess my thinking is, when we were moving here, I went to other school districts with Howell, and we definitely saw two-story buildings, and we came from LASD where there was lots of two-story buildings. So, it's definitely feasible. I guess it's just how much do they have to agree?
The comment is that any school that's built here will be great. Thank you. There is evidence that once you grow beyond a certain size, the character of the school changes, the community in the school changes. And that's why we are reluctant to grow to more than, let's say, 600-ish per school. Bullis Charter has grown to 900, and they want a single site, so obviously, at least in some sense, they're okay with that larger size. But that's not the model that we have. And I will say that Los Altos School District has been for years, one of the best school districts, elementary school districts in California. So our model is working. I personally am loath to change that model unless I see good reason to change that model.
Can you step over me? Thank you. Louder. Louder.
First of all, I need to declare I'm a charter school parent, and I care a lot about this because I'm also running for
Louder, closer to your mouth.
So one of the things I want to point out is currently, just by the number, there's 689 LASD students coming from the NEC area, and there are 97 Bullis Charter students are coming from the NEC area. So it's 669 versus 97. So that's one thing I want people to at least be aware. So when we talk about the traffic, thinking about the 900 students at the BCS and only 100 or less that are coming from this area, that means almost 800, plus minus cars going into this area every day in the future if BCS is placed here. And then secondly, I think it's also a matter of the process. To my understanding that BCS has a representative on the task force, on the Pennside task force, and BCS has now been involved in any other discussions with regard to how the site is going to be used and how the traffic is going to be used and how the site was selected in the first place. So I think that's another thing, at least I want to make it clear. And then the third thing, I think, is a matter of, how much it's going to be. Thanks to, City of Mountain View, I think the City Council decided to at least willing to contribute almost 101 million between PDR and park fees. I think that's a lot of money, from the City of Mountain View. So if, a charter school being placed at this neighborhood that's based on lottery, then the residents in this area may or may not be benefited, from that amount of money. I hope, that's something needs to be addressed as well. So the question I have is really, I think, to the board members, is really, what's the timeline that for you to decide, which school going to be placed there? Because I think there has been a lot of up in the air. I heard October 8th, October 16th, I think there's a city council meeting for the park fee decision. So can you give us a little bit more clarity in terms of what's the next steps?
Bryan mentioned those dates before, and that's the current understanding of those dates. October 8th is a likely date, and October 16th with the City Council.
Are you going to decide before October 16th?
So, one thing you need to understand is, as a board member or as a council member, I have personal opinions, but once the board makes a vote, then it's the board's decision. And so I can tell you what I think, but I can't tell you what the board thinks. Okay? And right now, I think that October 8th is going to be a key day, and October 16th is going to be a key day.
People had some questions about traffic, independent of what happens at the school site. Facebook's going to be bringing 2,000 or 3,000 employees into the San Antonio Center very soon. We've got around 1,200 housing units either under construction or approved. And so the City Council realizes we have to address that independent of the school issue. We've been urging Caltrain to provide more service to the San Antonio train station. And we've been exploring, and this is really early stages, expanding our free community shuttle, both in terms of the areas that it serves, as well as the hours it serves. We know for Graham Middle School that students can take community shuttle home to, say, to California and Escuela, but it doesn't run early enough in the morning. So we're looking at ways to use the shuttle system. And in fact, along San Antonio, some of us have talked to people in Los Altos and Palo Alto because we share San Antonio with the other cities to strengthen public transit, because we know if everybody drives from these new jobs and new housing, it'll just be a parking lot.
I just have a couple of comments. First, I'd like to applaud the City of Mountain View and the school board. I think this is a really complicated deal. It sounds really good, so thank you very much for the hard work. It's very difficult. I was involved in the first board meeting for the meetings for the bond measure a few years back, and haven't been involved since, but I've been watching closely, so thank you for the work. I am a resident in this area, so my feedback here is with respect to the school. I think having a neighborhood school is really, really important. I've been a Santa Rita parent and Egan parent, currently a Los Altos High School parent. Having to cross El Camino for the kids, I think, is a huge deal. It's a big deal, okay? And the traffic, and we are creating the traffic, having to go to Santa Rita, having to go to Egan. But if I had to choose personally, I think having a elementary school, a neighbor school here makes more sense from a practical standpoint, my kids aren't going to go there anymore, but just from a neighbor, a community member perspective, that seems the most practical to me. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Let's see, we haven't heard from you. I'll get through this again.
Yeah, so I actually wanted to echo a similar perspective. With elementary school age children, I think that little kids having to cross a major street makes a lot less sense to me. And from a neighborhood perspective, typically young parents move into neighborhoods that have an adjoining elementary school because you want to be able to either walk or supervise your kids to school. And then essentially having very young children cross the street like El Camino is, I would say, much more of a safety issue than having 7th graders being able to cross in any particular direction.
Thanks. Just want to point out that San Antonio is also a 6-lane highway. And, so it's closer. Yeah. I feel that we need to work with the city. Where's Lenny, Margaret? We need to work closely with the city to try to find some way of ameliorating that. It could be a shuttle bus solution. It could be a much more expensive overcrossing. We could helicopter them over. Lots of different solutions. But I think we need to look at it very closely and very seriously, because I forgot to mention, even though our goal is educational outcomes, our major constraint is safety. There's no point in having unsafe children in a grade school.
I'm going to go to Egan in a couple of years, and I live like a walking distance, and my friends walk together too, and I just feel like keeping Egan where it is would make it more friendly, because all my friends would walk there together, and I'd walk there too. And
So, do you ride your bike to school, or do you just walk to school? Okay. Walking is great. A lot of kids bike, and that scares me a lot. My son rides to Egan every day, and every day I go, I hope this is not the last thing he does. Seriously, Egan is one of our worst traffic back there. But I hear you about neighborhood schools. Safety, traffic, educational outcomes. Burn those into your mind.
There are more LaSalle kids in British charter school because they can pay priority to enroll to charter school. If British charter school is not your side, I'm expecting more Monterey kids than British charter school.
I think the comment was about the number of kids that are currently attending Bullis Charter School from different areas, referring to an earlier comment. And the comment was that if Bullis Charter School had a facility over here, then perhaps they would draw more students from this side of El Camino. And that very well may be true. Right. I mean, kids often tend to go to a close school, regardless of the school. We've seen that in our district and other districts as well. One other safety note, I know if we have anybody who lives over on the kind of the other side of things, over around Showers or Ortega, we have asked the city of Los Altos to study the possibility of a new crossing guard at Ortega over on that side, because currently there isn't one, and there are a lot of kids who cross El Camino. It's 3:45. I want to be respectful of everybody's time because we've already gone over a little bit. So I want to, first of all, recognize again Greg Land, Santa Rita Principal, and Raquel Mataroli, the Almond Principal. If you have questions or comments, they're feeling a little shy today, but if you have questions or comments, they'd be happy to talk to you about any concerns that you have. I want to say thank you again to Mayor Siegel and Councilmember Abe-Koga for coming out today. Thank you to Board President Vladamir. We are going to stick around for a little bit, so if you have more questions and comments, please feel free to come up and talk to us after. But I just want to, since we're already starting to lose a few people, I think we'll bring this part to a close after some closing words from Vladimir.
If you have any negative comments, Jeff Bear, Greg, or Raquel, if you have any positive comments, I want to hear them. Thanks very much for coming.